Welcome back, ladies and gentlemen of my alphas. The room has changed, hasn't it? The air feels different, heavier, charged with the weight of what you've become. I see it in your eyes. You've shed your innocence, your apologies, your need to explain why you walk like a storm through the lives of those who once doubted you. You've returned not as the person they knew, but as the reckoning they never saw coming. You left them not with a goodbye, not with closure, but with silence loud enough to haunt them. That's what it means to evolve, to outgrow not just the people who held you back, but the version of yourself that kept asking for permission to exist. You remember the nights, don't you? The ones where your bones felt like they were made of glass, breaking under the pressure of expectations you never agreed to carry. You remember how they looked at you, like a fragile thing, a story halfway written, a joke that never landed. And maybe, just maybe, you believed them for a while. But then came the silence, the isolation, the crucible, the nights that didn't end, the betrayals you didn't speak of, the mirror that stopped reflecting who you thought you were and started showing you who you could become. If you had the audacity to burn everything that made you weak, so you did. You burned the bridges, not in anger, but in clarity. You stopped answering calls that only came when they needed something. You stopped dimming your light to make others feel comfortable in their mediocrity. You stopped explaining your silence, your ambition, your hunger, because you realized that they didn't want to understand you. They wanted to contain you, box you in, define you, use you. But the truth is, you were never theirs to define, and now they sit with questions. They whisper your name like it's a myth, a ghost that walks between the cracks of their comfort. They didn't expect you to leave, and if you did, they thought you'd come crawling back. That's what they always think, isn't it? That you'll need them again, that you'll break without them. But you didn't. You broke because of them, and now that you've rebuilt yourself, brick by painful brick, they no longer recognize what stands before them. You left them with an ending they didn't see coming, not because you vanished, but because you transformed. You turned your scars into armor, your pain into fuel. Every tear they never noticed became a river you sailed away on. Every insult became a stepping stone. Every doubt they cast upon you became a mirror, reflecting their own limitations. And while they stayed the same, bitter, brittle, predictable, you became the weapon they never saw being forged in the fire they tossed you into. Do you remember how they laughed? The smirks, the sideways glances, the words laced in poison but disguised as advice. You're dreaming too big, they said. Play it safe, they warned. Don't be so emotional, they smirked. But now they scroll in silence. They stalk your name, hoping to find a crack in your armor, a flaw in your rising. But all they see is the trail you left behind, a path scorched with discipline, suffering, and ruthless intent. You didn't just walk away, you walked through. Through the shame, through the judgment, through every door they slammed in your face. And now, you stand before new gates, not waiting to be let in, but breaking them open. You didn't need their validation, you needed their doubt, because it became the soundtrack of your ascension. And when they ask, when they whisper, when they mutter behind closed doors, they will ask each other, what happened to you? The answer is simple. You remembered who the hell you were, before the world told you to be quiet, before the fear seeped in, before the masks, the compromises, the small talk that tasted like ash in your mouth. You remembered that you weren't made for the cages they built. You were made for war. Not the kind with weapons, but the war of will, of resilience, of becoming. And when the dust settled, you didn't just survive, you thrived. That's why they didn't see it coming. Because you didn't post about it. You didn't cry out for sympathy. You didn't broadcast your battles. You became silent, deadly, focused. You disappeared, not into weakness, but into work, into nights with no sleep, days with no applause, months with no praise. While they played pretend, you built empires in the shadows. You trained in solitude. You bled without witnesses. And now, they face a version of you that feels unfamiliar, untouchable, unstoppable. You see, power isn't loud. It doesn't scream or beg for attention. Real power is quiet, patient, merciless. It waits in the dark, biding its time while everyone else wastes theirs trying to be seen. And that's what you became. Not a spectacle, but a storm, a force. The kind of energy that doesn't need to knock to enter, because it is the threshold. They called you cold, distant, arrogant, but they never asked what made you that way. They didn't see the years you gave to people who only took, the love you poured into hands that were never meant to hold it, the loyalty you gave to those who would trade it for a moment of convenience. No, they didn't see that, and they never will. Because you're done explaining. You don't owe them your softness anymore. You owe yourself your strength. So when you left, it wasn't out of anger. It was out of necessity. Like a snake shedding its skin. Like a phoenix burning down to ash. You had to die in their world to be reborn in your own. And the silence you left behind, that was your final act of mercy. Because you could have destroyed them with truth. But you chose evolution over vengeance. You chose growth over grief. And they will never understand that, because they live in a world where comfort is currency, where playing small is survival, where conformity is a badge of honor. But you were built different. You were never meant to survive. You were meant to conquer, and that scares them, because they can't control what they don't understand. They can't manipulate what they can't predict. You are the variable, the wild card, the unfinished sentence that refused to end with a period. And now look at you. No longer asking, no longer begging, no longer explaining, just moving, with purpose, with venom, with grace sharpened into a blade. You stopped dancing for their approval and started marching to your own war drum. That rhythm you hear in your chest, that's your soul reclaiming its fire. That's your rage turning into discipline. That's your past fueling your precision. And still, they don't see it. They think success is a car, a watch, a post. But you've come to learn it's silence, peace, control, knowing you don't flinch when your name is brought up in rooms you've outgrown. Knowing they talk, but they talk after you've already left. Knowing you've become the ghost they fear will return. Not to seek revenge, but to remind them. They never really knew you. They knew who you were before the pain, before the process, before the shedding, before the long, brutal hours when you were alone, questioning everything, before the world cracked your ribs and shoved its fists down your throat. They knew the version of you that still cared what they thought. That version died, and in its place rose something that doesn't break, doesn't beg, doesn't wait. So now you walk differently, you speak differently, not louder, just clearer. Not with more words, but with more weight. You carry yourself like someone who's been to war and came back with medals no one can see, but everyone can feel. That's what unnerves them, your energy. It walks in the room before you do. It says everything your silence never could. They wonder what changed. The truth is, you stopped blaming yourself for how others mishandled you. You stopped apologizing for outgrowing the environment that kept you small. You realize that not everyone deserves front row access to your transformation. Some only deserve to watch from the sidelines, mouths shut, hearts burning with regret. You were never the villain. You were the lesson. You were the mirror they avoided, the reflection they couldn't stand to face. And now, with every step you take forward, they're left behind, trying to rewrite the history they once wrote with their laughter, their doubt, their absence. But history doesn't bend to their guilt. It belongs to the ones who endure, the ones who bleed and rise and never once ask for applause. You are that history now, a living, breathing warning of what happens when you underestimate someone built from scars, not privilege. Someone who chose to fight in silence while the world clapped for frauds. Someone who didn't crumble when they were broken, but rebuilt themselves sharper, colder, unforgiving. And that's what they didn't see coming. They thought you'd collapse, that you'd break, cry, crawl, that you'd send long messages explaining why you left, why you changed, why you had to go. But you didn't. You left them in the echo of their own assumptions. You let your absence be the teacher, your distance the sermon, your silence the final line in a story they never finished writing, because they never thought you would be the one to end it. But you did. You walked away without a word, without a look back, without a flinch. And in doing so, you carved a legacy not in noise, but in impact. They won't forget you. Not because you were loud, but because you were necessary. Necessary for their awakening. Necessary for your own becoming. That's why your story is different. That's why you're here. Not to be liked, not to be accepted, but to be remembered and feared. Not in the childish way, but in the real way. In the way that unsettles. In the way that forces people to question their own reflection. Because you don't just exist. You remind, you awaken, you expose, and most of all, you arrive. And the world, whether it admits it or not, will never be the same. But listen closely now, because this is where the story turns. This is where the ending becomes a warning. Not to you, never to you, but to them. To the ones who doubted, dismissed, destroyed. The ones who called you too much, too intense, too broken. The ones who couldn't stomach your potential because it made them feel small. They will try to come back. Oh yes, when the smoke clears and the dust settles and the noise dies down, they will come crawling. Disguised in apologies, wrapped in nostalgia, speaking the language of the past like it still means something to you. But you will not listen, because you are no longer the person they once had access to. They burned that bridge when they called your silence weakness, when they turned your pain into a punchline, when they tried to cage a soul that was born for the sky. Now, you speak a different language, one they were never meant to understand, a language forged in agony, ambition, and absolute clarity. They thought you'd come back the same, but you didn't come back. You ascended. And now, they have to live with that. With the version of you they'll never know. With the greatness they helped create by trying to destroy you. With the knowledge that their biggest mistake was thinking you needed them to rise. That's the part that breaks them. Not your strength, but your indifference. Not your success, but your silence. You walked away with nothing, and now you have everything. And they are left watching, pretending not to care, choking on the ending they never saw coming. They'll tell people you changed. They'll say you became heartless, cold, distant, but the truth is, you finally became honest. Honest about your worth. Honest about your time. Honest about who deserves access to your energy. And they don't. Not anymore. Not ever again. Let them talk. Let them speculate. Let them choke on their own version of your story, because the real story is written in your footsteps, in your stillness, in your decisions. And that story doesn't need to be told. It needs to be felt. In boardrooms, on stages, in silence, in the tension of your presence, in the fire of your absence, in the ripple effect of your refusal to play small ever again. You became the nightmare they didn't know they were creating, the consequence of their own cowardice, the shadow that reminds them what they lost when they couldn't recognize a legend in the making. You're not bitter, you're just done. And that's more terrifying than rage, because when a soul like yours stops giving, the world feels it. You see, the most dangerous thing you ever did wasn't walk away. It was heal. It was turn your rage into focus, your grief into goals, your heartbreak into hunger. You turned every wound into wisdom, every betrayal into boundaries, every insult into a reason to rise, higher than they ever imagined possible. And now they wonder, what drives you? It's not revenge. That would be too easy, too loud, too temporary. It's the knowledge that you survived, that you endured, that you refused to die in the places they left you bleeding, that you turned their doubts into discipline, their silence into strategy, their laughter into fuel. That's what drives you. You don't want their apologies. You don't want their recognition. You want something purer, peace, the kind that doesn't beg for company, the kind that doesn't shrink for others, the kind that comes from knowing you owe no one an explanation for why you chose yourself. You became your own salvation. And now, every step you take, every breath, every moment of stillness, it's sacred. It's yours. Not because the world gave it to you, but because you took it, earned it, claimed it with hands blistered from holding yourself together when no one else would. You became the hero they never wrote about, because you weren't palatable. You weren't pretty in your pain. You didn't bleed quietly. You roared. And then you built. You built when they said you were broken. You dreamed when they mocked you. You rose when they swore you wouldn't. And now you move like prophecy, like fate, like something ancient and inevitable, and they feel it. Every time your name is spoken, every time your work is seen, every time your story is told by people they never thought would care. They feel it. They feel the echo of the soul they discarded, the one they thought would vanish. But you didn't vanish. You evolved. You leveled up in silence. And now, you're not just alive. You are legendary. So let this be the final act of your silence. Let it be the thunder after the storm. Let it be the closing line that ends the chapter they never thought you'd finish writing. Walk away, not out of hate, but out of completion, out of self-respect, out of purpose. Let them sit in the ashes of their own assumptions. Let them wonder, question, regret. You left them with an ending they didn't see coming, because they never thought the hero of the story was you. But it always was. You see, they always thought they had time. Time to keep you small. Time to pull you back when you got too close to freedom. Time to manipulate you with memories, to confuse guilt with love, to twist loyalty into chains. But time, that's the one thing they never controlled. Because while they wasted theirs playing games, you were building an empire in the ruins they left you with. They thought this was a phase, that your distance was a tantrum, your silence a strategy. But this wasn't a tactic. This was evolution. This was spiritual warfare. This was the final detachment from a world that fed off your doubt. And now, they're waking up to the truth. You're not just gone. You're untouchable. Because there comes a point when even the kindest heart closes its doors. When even the most forgiving soul goes quiet. when the one they thought would never leave does. Not because they stopped loving, but because they finally started loving themselves more. And that kind of love, it's nuclear. It doesn't just heal. It destroys everything that ever fed on your self-hate. It exposes the parasites, the users, the cowards. It shatters the illusions. And when that love hits, when it takes over your bones and makes a home in your chest, it changes you permanently, violently, beautifully. Now, your silence is a boundary, not a wound. Your distance is protection, not punishment. Your absence is wisdom, not weakness. You learn to disappear from anything that didn't see your value until it was gone. And in that disappearance, you found something rare. You. Not the version they wanted, not the version they tolerated, but the version you buried for their comfort. The real you. The one who doesn't settle. The one who doesn't shrink. The one who walks into rooms like the answer to a question no one knew they were asking. And now, the world will feel the shift. Every step you take, every word you speak, every boundary you set, it's a declaration that you're no longer here to fit in. You're here to disrupt. Not for attention, but because truth disrupts everything built on lies. And you, my alpha, are the truth they can no longer outrun. They'll see you in their dreams, not because you haunt them, but because they know, deep down, they let something eternal slip through their fingers. You were never meant to be held by hands that trembled at your power. You were meant to rise alone, if necessary, so you could teach others what that rise looks like. And now, others are watching. They're watching how you move, how you command without speaking, how you love without losing yourself, how you lead without asking for permission. You've become a blueprint, a signal, a warning to every person who ever doubted their strength because the world told them to stay quiet. You are the one who broke the chain, and breaking chains isn't pretty. It's violent, it's messy, it's lonely, but it's worth it because now you look in the mirror and you don't see someone begging to be seen. You see someone who sees themselves. That's real power. That's irreversible. That's the kind of power they don't teach because it can't be taught. It's earned in blood, in silence, in fire. So let them whisper. Let them wonder. Let them tell stories about who you used to be. You don't need to correct them. You don't owe them a single word. Because the only thing that matters now is who you are becoming. And who you're becoming is the kind of force that breaks cycles, not hearts. You are not the wound anymore. You are the weapon. And as for the ones still trapped in their comfort, still trading authenticity for approval, leave them there. You tried. You waited. You gave them space to grow, and they chose to remain small. That's not your burden. You are not responsible for the transformation of people committed to staying broken. Let them stay. Let them watch. Because the story isn't over. You're not even in your final form yet. This question mark, this is just the beginning of your reign, the beginning of your era, the beginning of a life so loud in truth, so ruthless in purpose, so anchored in strength, that no lie, no betrayal, no shadow from your past can touch it. And if they thought the ending was the silence, they're wrong. The ending is when they see you standing at the summit, unbothered, unburdened, unstoppable, and realize you were the storm they laughed at, the seed they buried, the threat they ignored. You were never coming back to prove them wrong. You came back to prove you right. So now, here we are. At the end of the chapter, they never thought would close. At the edge of a story, they never believed you had the strength to rewrite. And as the last page turns, they're still stuck on the prologue. Back when you were soft, silent, waiting, But that version of you, it's gone, buried under the weight of every time they left you. Unread, laughed at your vision, doubted your worth. You left them with an ending they didn't see coming, not because you changed, but because you became. Because you stopped pretending, because you stopped hoping they'd see you, and instead saw yourself so clearly, nothing else mattered. You left them with silence, and from that silence, you built a kingdom. You left them with peace, and from that peace, you summoned a storm. You left them with a name, and that name became legend. You are not coming back. You are not dimming your light, shrinking your soul, dulling your roar to fit into spaces you were never designed for. From this moment forward, you walk different. You breathe different. You exist like a scar carved into time, permanent, visible, and unforgettable. They will speak of you not because they remember, but because they can't forget. And the truth they will carry to their graves is this: they could have stood beside you, but they chose to stand in your way. And now they watch you from the distance they created, haunted by the ending they never saw coming, because you became the one they never saw rising.